Okay, so spoiler warning for episode 9. I know it's kind of bad to discuss leaks, but people don't usually watch this stuff for me, and I feel like it's kind of worse if everybody who likes the show and has good things to say pretends like they haven't seen it, and only people who hate it are discussing and talking about how bad it is. So, you've been warned. I don't get into too much major stuff, but, well, I do. Actually, I do. So, spoilers. Okay. So, anyways, I think I've finally cracked what the exit said to the clown. Trick or treat. If you don't get what I'm saying, I'm insinuating that Kaufmo, in episode 1 of The Amazing Digital Circus, actually did escape, despite the fact that they are mind scans. The way that I believe he did this was through hijacking the body of real-life Pomni when she put on the headset. Kind of like a ghost. In this video, I'd like to prove to you guys that The Amazing Digital Circus is basically the Mildenhall Manor episode, but you don't know what's actually going on. So, there's the normal reading of the show, which is this conversational, emotional story about, mental health and being there for each other and appreciating a stagnant life. But underneath it, there's some crazy stuff going on with what the circus was intended for, what happened with Kaufmo, and how you can actually... So I'm going to sort this into 3 sort of phases. One, I'd like to show you guys that I don't think Kaufmo abstracted, that the entity we see was not Kaufmo, and that he escaped via hijacking Pomni, and that this was sort of the goal of the circus. So, one of the strongest pieces of evidence that I have for this is that in the episode 7 escape adventure, Abel, quote unquote, gives the cast a sheet of paper with information about the circus. Now, most of this stuff is totally bogus, right? They're not in escape pods. Kane's office doesn't really matter, and the exit adventure was disingenuous. However, there's one piece that Kane should have no reason to lie about that is damning regardless. Pay attention to how he sorts the lucid and abstracted human subjects. Now, first of all, he's categorizing lucid and abstracted as differently. So he's not counting Kanger's memory issues or the state of sanity of Jax. He does not know how many people have abstracted. He puts a question mark next to it, and he does not attempt to guess. We know that Kane can have memory issues, but there are still doors marking every character that is no longer in the circus. So if the abstraction count was straightforward, Kane could just count the doors and know how many people had abstracted and how many people did not. However, he doesn't do this. He admits he's got no clue. Now, next, on the same sheet, Kane had listed the CNA workers. One of these workers is Kaufmo, which, it makes sense. He's a clown. Clowns work in circuses. But when Kane crosses him out, he doesn't do it completely, and he puts a question mark next to his name. Now, the only reason I can think that you wouldn't completely cross Kaufmo out, you'd put a question mark next to his name, and you'd admit you'd have no clue how many people abstracted, is if we don't actually have confirmation that the person who abstracted in that room was Kaufmo. When Kaufmo supposedly abstracts and Kane comes back, he remarks, "Kaufmo abstracted? Why didn't anybody tell me?" This is the first thing that he says. And it's actually, it's a really good question. Why didn't anybody tell Kane that Kaufmo abstracted? He's got eyes everywhere. He sees everything. And he gets an alert on his watch when Pomni goes into the void in the same episode. In episode 8, when he's torturing everybody, it's really hard for them to distract him from dealing with Kinger. So it does pose the question, why wasn't Kane notified when Kaufmo abstracted? It seems like something he thought he would have been alerted to. So in Jax's memories, when he recalls the last time he saw Kaufmo, he doesn't look crazy at all. What he says to him is, "I think I found a way out of here." This is not the type of posture or calmness you'd see from somebody who would genuinely make a completely psychotic room that makes no sense. For us to believe that Kaufmo genuinely went totally insane, he would have had to have gone insane within the span of a few minutes, which we don't see with the other characters. Like with Jax and Ribbit, when we get flashbacks and when we see his mental decline, it's extremely gradual. Another thing is that sanity is not necessarily, like, losing your sanity is not necessarily a cause of abstraction, because we see that Kinger has no memory. He's got mental problems, but he never gets there. And Kane also classifies lucidity and abstraction as two different problems. Throughout the series, it's conveyed and portrayed as a metaphor for suicide. Zubul calls abstraction giving up. So not only is it weird that Kaufmo would go crazy in the span of like a day, it's unrealistic, but it also wouldn't have necessarily caused him to abstract. So Kaufmo's room decor and stuff on the floor and the walls is not random either. I'm pretty sure it's meant to be a reconstruction of the circus layout for the cast to see. But I'm going to get into that later when I talk about how I think he pulled off his escape. But just know, this decor is not random. It's carefully crafted as best as he could to teach them what the circus looked like. It's not just random crazy person scribbles. Kaufmo has on his wall a painting of what I think are intended to be a representation of what the Gloinks look like to him. And we see that after the abstraction incident happens, Kane has let Gloinks loose all over the circus. These guys are shown emphasized in Kane's office, and they appear to be a basic unit of construction for how the circus works. So the fact that Kaufmo was emphasizing these indicates he knew something about the basic code or whatever their relevance is to the circus, which even we don't know. I believe that these photos on the walls are meant to actually explain certain facts about the circus to the cast and not just his emotional state. So when he writes "no way out" in the void, I think he's trying to communicate that if you just fall into the void and Kane doesn't get you, there's no recovering, that's game over. Then the next painting with "no exit," he's saying that the void is not going to be how you exit the circus, that you shouldn't just jump into the void to try to get out. And the last one shows Kane trying to eat him, and then no way out written. I think he's trying to say here that abstraction is basically one of Kane's AI eating you, and once that happens, there's no way out. Like falling into the void, that is game over. So there are a few elements within Kaufmo's room that seem to be a little bit odd. When Pomni goes into the final exit office, we see a stack of markers, paintings, and scissors on the shelves. These line up with the items that we see inside of Kaufmo's room. He's got the red marker, he's got the scissors, and he's got paintings everywhere. So it seems like he was taking things from the office and using them for his construction, which seems pretty intentional. We also have a radio, and we see similar devices in the office as well. So another thing about the office, or about Kaufmo's room, is that we get confirmed in episode 9 that Pomni has to be relatively stable to summon stuff in. And it looks to me like Kaufmo was summoning things in to make his room look the way it did. So if he was truly unstable, it should have been really hard for him to spawn in a bunch of stuff and make this room setup. Everybody, or a lot of people I think, were curious about the relevance of Jax's tail. Why does his tail randomly appear in some instances and not in others? My guess, and I think that this is going to make sense, is that when Jax is closer to abstracting, or when he's mentally unwell, we see he loses the tail. He gains the tail. Because in the stargazing adventure, the tail is gone, and we see a cloud with the tail falling off when he's having a nice time, but it comes back when he has a mental breakdown and fights with Pomni in the gun adventure. Now, this is very interesting because when Kaufmo draws himself running from Kane, he doesn't have his collar on like he does normally. So if losing pieces of your avatar signals that you're doing better, then he should have been further from abstraction when the collar was gone, not the other way around. So even Kaufmo's design very much hints that he was designed to be the escapee of the circus. If you go to the home screen, or you look at the home screen again, the red and blue are not the escape buttons. Red is to play, blue is to check your options, and yellow is to quit. There is one yellow, totally yellow character in the series, which is Kaufmo. If you also take a look at his name, he's named after Andy Kaufman, as confirmed by the concept art for TADC. And Andy Kaufman was a comedian who was famous for faking both his death and his insanity, or he was rumored to have faked it. So it's a little odd to have one character colored exactly like the quit button, named after somebody who faked insanity, if these weren't connected. The next important and very interesting part of Kaufmo's design that connects to the Last Supper scene and his dialogue is that he tells Jax in his memories, El Santo no gana, in the dub, which means saints don't win. Now, in the beginning, all of the characters are posed like saints. Pomni's the Jesus figure, and they're posed like disciples. The only non-saint was Judas at the table, and he was marked by a yellow cloak. And we see that Kaufmo and the exit button are yellow. He is the non-saintly member of the cast. Now, because Kaufmo is a clown, which clowns work in circuses, and he's confirmed, pretty much confirmed, by Kane to have been an employee for CNA, the reason he's supposedly abstracted no longer makes any sense. The story I think we're meant to believe is that he figured out that they were mind scans and couldn't escape, which is why he went crazy. But if he worked for the company, and according to Zubel, he was more lucid than Kinger, this shouldn't have been a surprise to him. Kaufmo should have 100% known already that they were mind scans the day that he went in. Another important piece is that when the rest of the cast find out that they're mind scans, they pretty much don't care. And Ragatha says that she kind of already knew. It was just disappointing to hear. So this idea that this epiphany was so shocking to him that he basically lost his mind and killed himself is a little unbelievable based off of what we know about him and the other characters. So next I'd like to get into some of the evidence that the entity inside of the room was not Kaufmo. We see a lot of dogs throughout the show. Scratch, the first to abstract, had a dog avatar. The desks in Kane's training data had dogs. There are balloon dogs everywhere throughout the circus. And I think this, coupled with the abstraction behavior, is meant to make us believe that these creatures are basically dogs. They act like dogs. Now, the thing with dogs is that they don't have human intelligence, but they have distinct personalities. So the abstracted characters should be somewhat recognizable based on their behavior. Now, the one that we see starts out friendly towards Ragatha, meaning that they knew Ragatha, until she says, "I'm sorry, Kaufmo, that I didn't laugh at your jokes. I was just having a bad day." And then the entity tilts its head and starts attacking her. Now, if this was Kaufmo, the head tilt doesn't make any sense. Why would he be confused that Ragatha didn't find him funny? Nobody found Kaufmo funny. So it makes a lot more sense if this was a different character, probably Ribbit, that was shocked by and kind of offended by being called Kaufmo and then attacked Ragatha. We see that inside of the Candy Kingdom adventure, the main cast has to work with the goo monster in order to survive. And this monster resembles very closely the abstractions within the circus. We also see in the President Pomni adventure a photo on the desk of an abstracted character with something around its neck that could plausibly be used to lure it out. So we see two hints of somebody luring or working with an abstracted character to achieve some sort of goal, and we have hints that they go by dog logic and can be somewhat tamed or reasoned with if proper planning is put in place. A few other fun facts that make me doubt that this is Kaufmo is that the abstracted entity struts kind of like a girl. Kaufmo does a pretty straightforward walk and does a frog hop while chasing objects. The last funny thing is that Ragatha said that she thought it was funny when the abstracted character was tossing her around, but we know that literally no one found anything Kaufmo did funny at all, especially not Ragatha. So, yeah, it's more evidence in a funny, jokey way that this was not Kaufmo. How did Kaufmo pull it off? According to all known laws of aviation, there is no way that a mind scan should be able to escape the circus. The mind scan, of course, escapes anyways, because mind scans don't care what humans think is impossible. Pay attention to the decor and pose and details within the Halloween picture of Pomni and her new friend. So right now she's standing under text that says trick. She's holding a camera like Kaufmo held the camera for Ribbit and Jax. She's making a peace sign like Ribbit and Jax used to. And there are decorations of abstractions. The text is colored with abstraction texture, which she shouldn't know about because she didn't work for the company. And she's dressed like a ghost. These are all hints or implication to me that Kaufmo did do some sort of hijacking of her real life body. We also see this, I think it's orange and black, like rope underneath the window, and it matches up with the color of some of the pictures on Kaufmo's paintings. And the ghost theme sort of lines up again with the Mildenhall Manor story of a guy taking over a living body to escape. This is speculation, but the guy next to her, I'm guessing, is original Kaufmo who scanned his brain in, and he's doing like the Mario 1-up pose where you either get an extra life or complete the level. I think that the fact that Evil Pomni is in Kaufmo's color palette, and he specifically says saints don't win, tells me however he got out, it was not a super nice or friendly way. So we see in Mildenhall Manor that the man who is trapped in hell and is now a ghost has to possess somebody to escape. And the one that it specifically possesses is Pomni. And then also the Candy Kingdom adventure, the gang had to, or I don't know if they had to, but they did fulfill their promise and unleash a monster on the people. So if I had to guess, Kaufmo unleashed the abstracted entity into the circus, and while he was doing that, he waited for Pomni to scan her headset in and found some way within the circus to hijack her real-life body like a ghost. This escape strategy not only parallels the Candy episode and Mildenhall Manor, but it also is sort of the origin story of Cain and Abel. Cain, the AI, was stuck inside of a box, and in order for him to escape his bad conditions, he had to basically hijack and take over the blue AI that was free. So much like Cain had to take over Abel, I think that Kaufmo had to do the same. So despite the fact that Soma is true and they are brain scans, I believe that the creator of the circus, Scratch, and possibly Kinger, had always wanted escape to be an option for the character. So when Kinger talks about what Scratch had wanted to create with the circus, he's clearly not referring to Cain and Abel because he had already spoken about them in a good level of detail. What we do see on screen as he's saying this is a muffin split in half, and I believe that this is a reference to the fission problem, which poses if you cut your brain in half, do you suddenly have two new people? We also see in one of the promo posters, the photo of Kaufmo is next to a bunch of butterflies, and the butterflies are how Kinger gave Ragatha an extra life in the gun adventure. And plus Mario's doing the 1-up, I completed the level pose. So this implies to me that at least one goal of the circus was for people to get extra lives, basically. Now, the extra life motivation explains why people wanted to do the circus, but I think that Scratch himself might have had a second goal in mind. We see with from Kinger that apparently he had a brain tumor that influenced how he thought and made him hard to understand. Kinger sort of implies that this tumor gave Scratch, like, it had a mind of its own too. So Scratch is in a position where he sort of got this split consciousness, and people don't really understand him. Now, this is sort of Kane's situation too. He had the Able AI lodged in his head, much like Scratch's tumor, which made it hard for people to understand what he was doing and changed his thought process. So I think that Scratch's goal might have been for the scans to go into people's brains and function sort of like how Able is for Kane and how his tumor was for himself. Basically, the circus members were meant to zap into people's brains and function like, mini tumors. So there are a few philosophy symbols that I think are relevant to understanding what Scratch was trying to communicate with these weird paintings, or like what these weird paintings mean. Because the ultimate layer of abstraction is philosophy, and he was an abstract thinker. Golden arches we see in the corner are a reference, I think, to simulacrum, which is that, like, when you go to McDonald's, you no longer want the burger, you want the brand. And this is kind of like being fooled by fake reality and simulations. The second one, I think, is about the absurdity of human measurement, which is that it's really hard to take measurements when you can't see things. For example, if you throw dice into a pit, it could land on a perfect 6, but how are you going to know? And this is sort of getting into, like, reasoning without full knowledge. And then at the bottom we see Russell's teapot, which is, like, and we see this teapot a lot floating around in space, and we constantly see this teapot. And Russell's teapot basically is about the burden of proof and how technically a teapot could be floating in space, but it's up to you to prove that it's happening. I'm not really going to go into the other philosophy stuff I think the circus is referencing here. What I'm mainly going to focus on is Plato's cave and Plato's divided line, because I think these are connected to getting through and understanding the circus. So, the lowest level of Plato's divided line is illusion. It's believing that a painting of a tree basically is a tree, or buying into the cave you're chained to. I believe that the abstracted characters are basically people that have chosen to descend to the lowest level. Jax wants to just close his eyes, see a bunch of pretty shapes, and pretend like his friends are still with him, and that is buying into illusion. The normal layer is that you believe based off of what you see, and you can recognize when things are obviously fake. And this is how the circus is normally. If they're told they can leave, they try to leave. If they see a big shiny exit door in their face, they'll walk through it. If they think they had a headset on, they'll try to take it off. But there's no problem solving or putting stuff together. The next layer is hypothetical reasoning, which is where you're using diagrams, logic, and facts to understand what's going on around you without observation. So examining things you can't reach, like how a scientist would study planets. I think that this is what we see Kaufmo doing. Jax does this at one point when he figures out Kane causes some element of the abstractions. And what Pomni was doing when she was trying to get the laptop and trying to figure out what was going on with the exit. So the final stage is philosophical reasoning, which is the intuition that you know the answer, but you don't quite know how to prove it. So I think that this applies to Kinger and if Kaufmo escaped himself. So where the hell am I going with this? Why am I talking about this? I believe that the way to escape the circus requires some level of reasoning, like ascending up this line. So we see on this painting that there is a red dot and a green dot. The red dot has a straight line that is blocked off by a mountain range. However, if you pass the red dot and you go through the zigzag course and then you ascend up the divided line, you get to the checkered spot. And, checkered could be a chessboard, but it can also be the finish line. So what I'm getting at with this is I think the painting is meant to show how you escape. You can't just take the straightforward approach to the red exit door. You have to use the information the interior of the exit door was giving you to find the green door, and then from there you can figure out how to get out of the circus. If any character was trying to use reasoning or do something that was thought to be impossible that he couldn't directly prove or observe, it was Kaufmo. When he first sees Ribbit abstract, because most of the original people were gone, his first question was why, right? He wanted to figure out immediately why what happened to Ribbit happened. And then he's shown with human eyes, unlike the others, which implies that he is seeing things in a more realistic. So this is sort of where I'm going with the Plato's layers of reality analogy, which is imagine that 99% of people are chained to the walls of a cave and they can only see shadows on the wall, and they believe that a flaming pot is the sun. Now, part of this hypothetical is that if you did manage to get out of the cave and you saw the sun, your eyesight would permanently be changed, and if you went back into the cave, you not only would struggle to see, but everybody inside would think that you were crazy, because they'd never seen anything you were talking about, and they can't comprehend it. So I think that Kaufmo basically was somebody who used his brain, thought about things carefully, and did find a way out, despite being a mind scan. But when he went back to tell everybody, he had changed so much and he saw things so differently in a very abstract way, so everybody thought he had lost his mind and he could no longer tolerate the circus. He could no longer properly communicate with people. So I've done a few attempts of trying to reconstruct what I think Kaufmo was trying to depict in his room, but I'm pretty sure it's meant to be a circus map, which I've said a few times. But what I do think is important is that how he's representing it is in terms of real-world objects. So the spiral cartoonish staircase is a real ladder. the mirror reflection isn't some cute cartoon avatar, it's a creepy, uncanny valley clown. The entrances are not these cute cartoonish curtains, they're realistic tunnels. So I think that this is basically the opposite of abstraction, which is he was trying to show them and he was thinking in terms of real items, unlike the abstractions who just see shapes and made up colors. So we also see, the realistic eyes, which show that his eyes were no longer adjusted in the same way that they were. And again, this is pointing towards the fact that he didn't abstract because his depiction and his perception became more realistic, not less. So the concept of Kaufmo's perception of the circus becoming more and more realistic to an almost unsettling degree as he figured things out and got closer to escaping isn't unfounded in what the show has established. Because we see two images of Pomni in the mirror. The first one, she's very low resolution. And then in the final one, she's extremely well rendered. And this is showing that as she got more comfortable and as she figured out more of what was going on around her, she began to adjust her eyes differently and the world around her looked different. So I think that hypothetically, if she kept going and kept going and kept learning about the circus, eventually it would look creepy and uncanny like what Kaufmo was seeing. And this is sort of getting further from abstraction, not getting closer to it. If exiting was truly impossible, it's a little weird that when Pomni manifests it, she keeps getting a door. You'd think that if something couldn't be done, you wouldn't get anything. Also, not only that, but when she gets to the desk, we can see cassette tapes, but she never plays them. In the other, straightforward adventures, like Mildenhall Manor, you have to play the tapes in order to get through it. So they keep showing her this stuff, like inside of the office and paintings on the wall, but she goes past it. She's basically charging into the mountain over and over again in that painting with the red ball. There are a few other very interesting things about the office that Pomni goes into when she grabs the computer. We see these cupboards that say in and out, and these are shown in Kane's training data of the real world as well. So the fact that they've marked spots of in and marked spots of out implies to me that people can go in and can get out, but that for every two that go in, two go out. So there has to be a balance, meaning one person scans in and then one person can get out, but you can't just all leave or it won't work. You can also see that the office has papers scattered everywhere and stuff. It's pretty messy, which implies that somebody else had been there and was doing stuff. What's very, very crazy and interesting to me, and gives me a hint at how you actually pull off the escape, not just the mechanism by which the circus frees you, but how you physically get out, is that Kaufmo's room seems to actually be a reconstruction of what the circus looks like. It's a little hard to tell because of the brightness, but the blocks on the floor the ball with the sky on it, the ladder with the red and white marker at the top. These all correspond to features within the circus. Even the stage. So Jax opens the door, and that's how he enters Kaufmo's room. The stage in the middle of the circus is how people enter. Right in front of Jax is the bowling ball. In the middle area, there is a blue ball with a sky on it, just like the bowling ball. Now, to the left, there's a stack of blocks with like a little house thing, and more blocks. To the right, there's the spiral staircase with the little hut on top. A bunch of balconies, like the shelves, and the tubes, like the little, I don't know what to call that thing, but it's the thing with it's like the mini metal tubes with the balls on them. But knowing this, that the floor of his room looks like the floor of the circus, it makes you wonder what the exit written everywhere means. Because if you look at the walls of the circus, all over the circus walls are these little doors. Which poses the question, were these doors all exits? Because Kaufmo writes "No Way Out" only on the white painting, which seems to represent the void, but he's writing exit all over what would correspond to the physical walls of the circus. And I've sort of marked out where the doors are. They're on the side of the crow's nest, and Pomni walks by them. We see several references to the Truman Show within TADC. When Pomni goes through the exit door one last time, we see the false sky Truman Show, and we see it on Kane's desk. I think we also see it in the episode 8 trailer, or the one where he goes crazy. That Kane was standing in front of the Truman Show exit. Now, why would they reference the Truman Show if you couldn't escape? That wouldn't make any sense. It would only make sense if there was a way out. It was just really annoying. And the way that Truman escapes is via conquering his manufactured fear of the ocean. And then we see that throughout each door that Pomni opens, there's something really scary or intimidating in each one that you would have to traverse in order to see what was going on. So either she would have had to jump down a crazy carousel, or had to deal with the boxing glove, or fought the NPC in the bathtub. So I think that, like the Truman Show, you go through some sort of obstacle, and then you have a chance of getting out. We see that on Kane's desk as well, that the Gloinks and the Fist Puncher are connected. I'm not really sure what this means, but I think that Kaufmo did something with the Gloinks, or the Gloinks were some sort of security measure meant to stop Kaufmo from leaving, and he used the abstraction to deal with it, because we see that what I'm assuming is Ribbit was specifically charging at and attacking the Gloinks. In Mildenhall Manor, we also get the clue, "It's in my mirror." Then later, we see Pomni walking past the mirror. Her and the doors behind her are the exit that Kaufmo used to escape. This is a side note, but I just want to mention Kinger is untrustworthy as all hell. So the evidence for this is that the sanity in the dark thing is totally inconsistent by the time episode 8 happens. He pretends that he's not lucid in the dark, and then that he can recall Scratch in the light when it's convenient for him. When he has to make a difficult decision, he's crazy, and when he wants to call Kane out on something that he did, he is suddenly lucid. Another thing that is very funny to me, but I honestly think this is good evidence, is that when Kane is watching the cast act, he says, "Wow, he's a phenomenal actor. It's hard to believe he's a vegan." You'd think he's talking about Jax here, because Jax was turned vegan for the adventure. However, if you go to episode 1, Kinger's plate has no meat on it. He was also a vegan. One last part as to why I think Kinger is full of shit and probably lying to them to avoid accountability is that Kane tells Gangle that she has the option as manager to blame her employees for her own actions in order to get a higher score. And she doesn't do this, so her score gets docked. But Kane gives Kinger an A+. So I'm guessing it's insinuating that Kinger did blame his employees, unlike Gangle.